So normally on any given week, I spent a fair amount of time thinking about the scripture passages and kind of working on what they say to me and what I think I should proclaim. This week was a little different as we were with Pam's family, but I knew I wanted to speak about Epiphany, so I had an idea. So maybe I'd spent like 2 or 3 hours thinking about it. But by the time yesterday came around, I did not feel ready. And so I'm sitting down and I sat at my computer and I wrote my first line, and that line sat there all by itself for a good 2 hours. And I'm struggling and looking for an epiphany. And the line that I wrote was, the passage of Isaiah reminds us that we are called to shine. And in the reading from Isaiah, it says, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you." And I kept going over and over on that line, and I mentioned it to Kaylin, and Kaylin says, "Well, you have 2 options." And I said, what are those options to shine? He says, 1, you produce your own light, and 2, you reflect the light of others. And I thought about that, and suddenly it started to, I don't know, it took root, and finally I had my epiphany. And my first thought was quite easily, and the simple answer: reflect the light, the love, and the grace of God. And this is something we are always called to do. A light so bright that a lot of people have a hard time looking directly at it. And our way, in small ways, is to share that light and that grace, that love of God with others. And that felt good, and I could work with that, but I realized that was an easy sort of given. I'm not breaking anything new to you by saying to you, reflect the light of God, reflect the love and the grace of God. Not that I break anything new any other week, but I wanted something a little more. And then I started to think that maybe another way, and I was thinking about this too as we come into a new year, maybe another thing that we are called to do is not just reflect the light of God, but also reflect the light of the people around us. To be the ones that highlight the good in others, their grace, their beauty, their wisdom, to help others to see what is special about the people that are in our lives or that we meet. And when that thought came to me, it was that sort of click, and that feels right. I don't know how many of you had a chance to look at the moon last night, but it was beautiful. It hung there in the sky, and Pam and I were taking our dog for a walk along the trail, and that moon, everything was bright. The sun had set, it was night, but it was bright. And the moon just kept drawing. I would turn and walk sideways, walk backwards, it kept drawing the eye. But that light is not the moon's. That light is from the sun. And we never really should look at the sun directly, but we see some of the beauty of the sun through the reflection of the moon. This isn't the only thing that the moon does. The moon, 2 days ago, Ian and I drove past, because we were all staying in New Horton. And so we drove past Waterside Beach, and just when the tide was coming all the way in. And I don't know if you've been to Waterside Beach, but there's that kind of lip that you go down, and then the beach just kind of runs away. The water was coming over the lip at the top. I had never seen it that high. And it was washing over what you think of when you get there. You're like, how does the water ever get that high? It was that high. And a lot of people would say, wow, look at the strength of those waves, the power of the tide. But it's the moon that does that. It's the moon that pulls out the water to its farthest ability. It's the moon that has that effect on the tide. And I remember when I went to the family, I said, wow, the tide was so high. They said, well, I wonder why. Is it because it snowed? I said, no, it's the moon. And they know that, but it's not that we think about the moon in that way. We think of the moon as mostly just reflecting the light of the sun. But the moon does all of these things, and It does it by bringing out the best, or the strength in the water, by sharing the sun, the light of the sun. And I thought, this is not a bad example for us in this winter. To be the ones that pull out the strengths in others. To be the ones that help them to reflect the light and the love and the grace, not only of God, but the people in our lives. So maybe a way that we can shine isn't always that sense of, how can I do more? How can I be better? But how can I help others to see the beauty that is around me? How can I help others to see the grace and the love of God, not just in me, but in other people? To see the face of God in those people that walk around us. This week I have 2 parole hearings that I am going up for. And I go as assistants. Both of them will be hard. But I go as an assistant to try to help the parole board to see the goodness in them that they might not see otherwise. And it's humbling when the parole board will look to me and they'll say, "And what do you have to add?" And I'm like, the whole aspect of it is to help them to see that this person I'm standing beside isn't just what their crimes tell the parole board that they are, isn't just a series of events that led, but are people that deserve a chance and grace and love. The gifts of the Magi. The Magi don't come to say, "Look, we are so great because we're bringing all of these gifts." And it's interesting, if you read through the history in the Bible, they aren't called kings, they're called Magi. And some interpretation, but mostly they are, for lack of a better word, people who have wisdom. They are knowledgeable, they follow the stars, they have a certain wisdom. They aren't necessarily kings, actually, but we lift them up. We have them kings, and I was reading that one is seen as the king of Persia, one is seen as the king of India, and one is seen as the king of Ethiopia or Arabia. And we try to lift the Magi and make them special. But in Scripture, they aren't mentioned by name. The only thing that we are told about them is that they have come a long way to give the gifts to Jesus. And they have come to lift up and to reflect the light of the Christ, of the child that is born, of the way that the star has led them. And that is a worthy thing in and of itself. We don't have to make them into kings of vast realms. We don't have to give them all of these things. They have come to reflect the love that has been gifted to this world. Gifts aren't about them, it's about the one they are giving it to. And that is hard for us sometimes to not make it about us. And I say this with hesitation, because for the most part, I think most of the people I meet have low self-esteem, or at least they don't always feel good about themselves. They feel like they haven't done enough, they haven't been enough, and people, I find, are far harder on themselves than they are the people who walk around with, "Oh, I'm great, I'm special." There are those people out there, and good, but most of the people I see beat themselves down. And what, when I first read the passage from Isaiah, I thought, "Oh, how can I shine?" In some ways, the ability to have others' lights shine isn't a diminishing of ourselves. In some ways, it'll make us brighter, but it is a task that we can all do, because we can all see the goodness in the people around us. We can all see the beauty in the people and help others to see it. And almost just as importantly, in fact, probably more importantly, help those people to see it. Have you ever pointed out something to someone and they go, "Really?" And you see them kind of light up, and it can be something small, like, and I am terrible at these things, but "Oh wow, that jacket looks really nice on you. And you see them kind of by surprise. You go, really? This jacket looks, and you lift them up, and they see something in themselves that they would not have if you hadn't pointed it out to them. Or you see someone do something kind or nice, and you say, wow, that was really nice. And they're like, oh. It sounds small and minuscule, but every time we reflect back to someone what they have done, the goodness in them, the beauty, we make this world a brighter place. We reflect and shine the love of God, not just directly from God, but from the people all around us. The three magi were traveling, and they were not getting along. They would argue. At first it started off great, but it was a long journey, and instead of becoming more comfortable with each other, they started to become somewhat irritable. And you can only ride on camels and mules that long without it kind of starting to take its toll. And they started to, it started small as kind of like, well, you know, frankincense is fine, but gold is better. And well, gold, what can you do with gold? It's just heavy, like myrrh. And they would start to just kind of talk about whose gift was better. And this went around and around. And then they started to argue about, well, you know, you've been in the front now for 2 days. I've been in the back. I'm eating all the dust. I think we need to change. And they would start to grumble, or this is the best way to go, no, that's. And by the time they got to see King Herod, they were kind of in a grumpy state. They went in, they wanted to find this, get it done, and go home. They went to Herod, and Herod was like, oh, I don't know. And they're like, oh, okay, fine. Then they kind of get the sense, and they moved on to Bethlehem. And that's when everything changed. They went in there and they were overwhelmed. And it wasn't just the child, but the whole sense of the presence of something special. They stayed for 3 or 4 days, and on the 4th day, just before they were going to go, Joseph kind of gave each one of them a blessing. And to the oldest one, he said to him, your faith in what you believe has drawn you here and will guide you the rest of your life. It was strong and will just get stronger. And the older man kind of stood up straighter, and the youngest one was watching all this, and he was like, well, yeah, okay. There were times when we were wondering, does this make sense? Should we turn back? But the oldest guy, he always said, yep, I believe, and we followed him because of the belief of his faith. So yeah, that makes sense. Then the second one went forward, and Joseph put his hand on him and said, your courage to continue when others would turn back, to have that sense of bravery. It has stood you well to get here, and it will continue to lead you as you will be someone who stands up for others. And again, the young guy is watching this. He goes, well, yeah, there were times when we were scared, where even the old guy was like, yeah, we need to move forward, but there were bandits and stuff, and the middle magi, he was like, nope, I'm not backing down, I'm going for it. And his strength carried us through. But now is the youngest one to come forward. And he was nervous. He was wondering, what's my blessing? What's my blessing? And he gets there, and Joseph puts his hand on his shoulder and says, you are the mirror, and you reflect the beauty of the world. And he's like, mirror? Like, really? He got faith. I get to be a mirror? I get to reflect others? And he was kind of like, sorry, this happened the 3rd day. The 4th day, just before they left, they went to say goodbye, and they were leaving, and it had bothered him all night. Like, a mirror? I don't want to reflect. I wanted something. And he went to Joseph just before he left, and he says, Joseph smiled and said to him, you may not see this, but yours is the greatest gift. And the youngest one thought, well, no, I wanted faith, I wanted courage. But they started going back, and they'd had the dream, and they were going back a different way. And he started to think about it. Now, they had bickered all the way in, and even though there was that sense of the presence of God and the child, he thought, I could see us easily falling back into those old patterns about, who goes in the front, who eats the dust and stuff. So the very first day, and they had kept track meticulously about who should be in which position, and it was his turn to be the front. He looked to the oldest man, he says, "Your faith has guided us, and it has been a blessing to me. You know what? You go forward today. I will ride in the back and do it gratefully." The old man was like, "Wow, if you insist," and was quite happy. And the next time his turn came, the youngest to go forward, he went to the second. The old man was kind of hoping it would be him again, but he went to the second oldest. He said, "Your courage, it has been a gift to me and has strengthened my sense. You go first and I will ride in the back." And the man was like, "Wow, okay." And he kept doing all of these, not only just in the riding, but when they would sit, he would say to them, "I really appreciate your wisdom or your viewpoint." And he kept lifting them up. And after having done this, and for about a week, they just kind of took it all in. Like they were happy to get this sense of praise and adoration. But after a week, it was almost as if this hole inside them had been filled, and they started to brim over. And they started to say to him, "Your cheerfulness and your spirit has been that which has maintained us. Your sense of confirming our gifts has been such a gift to us. When we have doubted, your faith in us has kept us." And the whole trip back was completely different. Now, part of it was because they'd seen the Christ child and that sense, but part of it too was in the youngest one's ability to reflect the strength and the beauty in the older two. Instead of seeing always himself in competition with them, he started to reflect back their gifts, and they started to see in him that he truly was the glue that held them together. We shine when we reflect the light of others. When we point out the gifts of the people around us, and we help them and others to see that, it does make us brighter. Because maybe in this way, we truly reflect the light and the love of God.